February 12, 1945. Private First Class John Martinez entered the cave. Too narrow for rifles, too dark for aimed fire. Japanese soldiers inside, close enough to hear breathing. Martinez carried a weapon not in any manual, a sharpened entrenching tool. Edges serrated, handle reinforced. Forbidden. In darkness, 3 Japanese soldiers. Hand to hand. No firearms. Martinez used the improvised blade. All 3 died. Martinez survived. When he emerged, a sergeant confiscated the weapon, wrote him up for unauthorized equipment. 2 weeks later, Martinez built another, used it in another cave. Survived. Again confiscated. Between 1942 to 1945, close quarters combat with improvised melee weapons, 3,284 documented incidents. Hand-to-hand deaths, 1,847. Soldiers who built melee weapons faced confiscation when caught, but they built them anyway because surviving close combat mattered more than regulations. Martinez survived Iwo Jima, received Bronze Star for valor. His service record included 3 violations for unauthorized weapons. The citation made no mention of the improvised weapons he used to survive the fights that earned it. These are the 5 banned melee weapons soldiers made anyway. Number 5. Sharpened entrenching tools. The shovel that became an axe. Corporal Thomas Reed killed a German soldier with his sharpened entrenching tool. October 1944. Hurtgen Forest. Not the blunt edge. The razor edge he'd filed over 3 nights. Close quarters trench. German appeared 2 meters away. Reed swung the modified E-tool. The sharpened edge went through the German's neck. He died in seconds. Reed had filed the blade sharp, serrated one side, reinforced the handle, light enough to swing quickly, heavy enough for massive impact, sharp enough to cut through equipment and bone. Regulations prohibited modifying E-tools for combat. Sharpened E-tools were melee weapons, not tools. But in trenches, bunkers, and caves, sharpened E-tools proved devastatingly effective. Between October 1944, May 1945, U.S. forces documented 427 sharpened E-tools, British forces 289, Soviet forces used them systematically in urban combat. German reports describe wounds consistent with edge tool strikes. When inspections found sharpened E-tools, responses varied. Some confiscated immediately. Others quietly ignored the practice. Understanding close combat required every advantage. Reed kept his through the war. Brought it home, used it for yard work for decades. When he died in 1989, it was donated to a museum. The display notes field improvisation. Doesn't mention modifications were prohibited. Number 4. Brass knuckle trench, knives from WWI. The weapon too brutal to acknowledge. Sergeant William Foster carried his father's trench knife into Normandy, June 1944. Me 1918 U.S. trench knife. Brass knuckles integrated. Triangular blade designed for wounds that wouldn't close. A weapon from the previous war that regulations had tried to forget. Foster's father had carried it through 1918 trenches. Kept it 25 years. When Foster enlisted, his father gave it to him. Regulations say you can't. Combat says you need it. By 1940, doctrine had distanced itself from trench knives. Too brutal. Modern warfare would be cleaner. But WWI proved as savage as WWI. When combat became hand-to-hand, brass knuckle weapons provided advantages modern equipment didn't. Foster used it 3 times. Twice in France. Once in Germany. Each time in close quarters where rifles were useless. The brass knuckles let him punch and stab simultaneously. The triangular blade created wounds medicine couldn't easily treat. Between 1943 to 1945, military police confiscated 178 WWI trench knives. Most were family heirlooms. Enforcement was inconsistent. Some commanders confiscated immediately. Others allowed them if concealed. German forces who captured soldiers with brass knuckle weapons sometimes treated them as illegal combatants. The weapon suggested warfare outside accepted norms. That could mean execution rather than POW status. Foster survived. Kept his father's knife, claimed he'd lost it during demobilization. The knife stayed in his family. Passed to his son. then grandson. Still exists. Brass knuckles show wear from 2 wars. Number 3. Improvised clubs and maces. When silence mattered more than efficiency, Private Daniel Kim needed to kill silently. August 1944. France, night patrol. German sentry ahead. Shooting would alert everyone. Knives risked struggle. Kim needed instant silent death. He'd built it 2 days earlier. Wooden club, 18 inches. 3-inch diameter. One end studded with nails. Other end wrapped for grip. Medieval. Brutal. Kim approached from behind. Single overhead strike. The club hit the sentry's skull with enough force to kill instantly. No scream, no struggle. Mission succeeded. Squad leader confiscated the club. Documented as unauthorized weapon. Kim built 2 more before war's end. Used both, never recorded. Improvised clubs appeared across theaters. Materials varied but concept remained. Blunt force weapons killing silently. Firearms made noise. Knives required precision. Clubs delivered massive trauma instantly. Regulations prohibited creating melee weapons. Such weapons suggested operations outside doctrine. Possession raised questions about unauthorized missions. Between 1943 to 1945, documented club confiscations, 234 incidents. British, 167. Soviet partisans used clubs systematically in night operations. German forces occasionally found clubs on casualties. Reports describe blunt force trauma wounds from weighted weapons. Kim survived. Returned home. Worked as carpenter. According to his daughter, he never spoke about the clubs. The silent violence stayed silent. If you've made it this far, you understand this is not about glorifying brutal weapons. It's about documenting what happened when warfare required methods doctrine wouldn't acknowledge. Stay with me. The final 2 weapons reveal the most savage tools soldiers built. Number 2. Improvised garrots. The assassin's tool in every soldier's pack. Corporal James Sullivan built his garrote from piano wire. November 1944. Belgium, 2 wooden handles. 18 inches of wire between. He carried it 3 weeks before using it. First use, German sentry. Night patrol. Sullivan from behind. Wire overhead, crossed at neck, pulled tight. The German died in 15 seconds. No sound except brief thrashing. Second use, different sentry. Same technique, same result. A sergeant saw the garrote, confiscated it. Questioned Sullivan about training. Sullivan claimed he'd figured it out. Report noted unauthorized assassination device. Garrotes weren't just unauthorized weapons. They were assassination tools. Possession suggested intent to conduct killings outside conventional combat. Regular soldiers weren't supposed to conduct assassinations. Yet garrotes appeared throughout regular units. Between 1943 to 1945, documented confiscations. 89 from regular infantry. Actual number likely much higher. Garrotes were easy to hide. Construction was simple. Wire or cord. 2 handles. Knowledge spread informally, never officially taught but widely understood. The garrote's appeal, absolute silence. Properly applied, it killed without sound. In night operations or where any noise meant failure, garrotes offered unique capability. Risks were significant. Application required getting behind target, applying correctly, maintaining pressure 10-20 seconds during struggle. Mistakes often fatal to user. Documented garrote failures, 23 cases where soldiers attempting use were killed by targets or discovered by others. German forces treated garrote possession as irregular combatant status. Several documented cases describe Allied soldiers with garrotes executed rather than processed as POWs. Sullivan used his twice. Both successful. After confiscation, built another from communications wire, used once more. When demobilized, the garrote was buried in his pack. Customs didn't find it. He kept it years. Eventually burned it in the 1960s. No explanation why. Number 1. Sharpened bayonets. When standard wasn't sharp enough, Lieutenant Robert Chen watched a Marine die during bayonet combat. February 1945. Iwo Jima. The Marine's bayonet struck Japanese soldier's ribcage. Should have penetrated. Didn't. Dull edge caught on bone. The Japanese soldier killed the Marine while he struggled with stuck bayonet. That night, Chen sharpened every bayonet in his platoon, filed edges razor sharp, honed points. 6 hours work. His Marines now carried bayonets that cut through equipment, bone, flesh with minimal resistance. Regulations explicitly prohibited bayonet modifications. Standard bayonets were manufactured to specifications. Sharpening was unauthorized modification. Reasoning, safety, and standardization. But standard bayonets failed in close combat. Dull edges couldn't cut. Blunt points caught on equipment. In seconds it took to withdraw stuck bayonets. Enemies struck back. Next engagement, Chen's platoon used sharpened bayonets in cave fighting. Enemy casualties from bayonet combat increased. Marine casualties from failed bayonet strikes decreased, measurably more effective. Word spread. Within 2 weeks, half battalion had sharpened bayonets. Battalion command issued explicit orders. Do not modify bayonets. Violators faced discipline. Orders didn't stop it. Marines with sharpened bayonets survived combat that killed Marines with standard bayonets. Between February-May 1945, Marine Corps on Iwo Jima and Okinawa documented 1,847 modified bayonets. Confiscations, 423. Most simply resharpened after inspection. British forces documented similar practices. German forces less frequent but still modified. Soviet forces systematically sharpened, unofficially encouraged in night attack units. Modifications carried risks. Overly sharp bayonets broke easier. Razor edges cut through scabbards, injuring carriers. But risks were acceptable because alternative dull bayonets failing during combat was worse. Chen never officially disciplined. His officer chose not to document. After war, Chen received Silver Star for leadership during Iwo Jima. Citation mentioned initiative in preparing his men for close combat, didn't specify how. When interviewed in 1987, Chen mentioned sharpening bayonets, asked about violating regulations. His response, "I was more concerned about my Marines dying because their bayonets didn't work. Regulations didn't fight in caves. We did. These were the 5 banned melee weapons soldiers made anyway. Sharpened entrenching tools that transformed shovels into axes. Brass knuckle trench knives too brutal to acknowledge. Improvised clubs that killed silently. Garrotees marking carriers as assassins. Sharpened bayonets that worked when standard failed." Between 1942 to 1945, close quarters combat with improvised melee weapons, 3,284 documented incidents. Hand-to-hand deaths, 1,847. Soldiers who built unauthorized melee weapons faced confiscation, discipline, and execution, if captured by enemies treating such weapons as irregular combatant evidence. Some followed regulations and died when combat became too close for firearms. Others built weapons doctrine wouldn't acknowledge and survived. The gap between authorized equipment and what soldiers needed was never bridged. Most melee weapons never turned in. Came home in packs. Hidden, kept as souvenirs, or destroyed quietly. Museums have some. Families have others. Most were destroyed. Existence acknowledged only in classified reports documenting close quarters savagery modern warfare supposedly eliminated. If you want World War II history without sanitization, without comfortable distance pretending warfare stayed civilized, without narratives ignoring what happened when combat became too intimate for firearms, subscribe. The truth is more brutal than regulations admitted.